This other term is asat grahat. Sat and asat. Sat means substance or that which exists or eternal. And asat is the opposite. Temporary, illusory, seems to be real but isn't real. No substance in asat. Looks like it's substantial but it's not. And grahat. One of the terms that we use in iskcon all the time is the grihastha, ashram. An ashram indicates a place where there's spiritual activity. A home for a householder is an ashram if it's a place for cultivation of spiritual activity. That's grihastha ashram. And if it's not for the cultivation of spiritual activity, then it's griha medhi. D. This word D is intelligence. Like here, diyam. So griha, that's the home. And grihastha ashram is where the home is for the cultivation of spiritual activity, or the mode of spiritual activity. Same as what Prabhupada said in this chapter 6 introduction. So back in Canto 2, we hear the same idea expressed in different languages. Aham and mama. I and mine. So the mine part of material consciousness, because that's how Prabhupada translates absorption in material consciousness, asat grahat. It's not just the home, it's mine. My home, my car, my computer, my bank, the fruits of our activity, attachment to the fruits of the activities. Because if I'm this body, that's who I am, then what's mine is what is produced from the body. That's mine, because it's from me. So my activities have results or fruits. And the fruits are mine because I did the activity, attached to fruit of activity. And with those fruit of activity results, I go and get stuff and get a home. And then the husband or wife, and that's mine, my husband, my wife, and my children, and my stuff. So in the broader sense, griha is not just home, it's all those things. Mine. I and mine. So those who are in this I and mine consciousness, or dehinam and asat grahat, samudvigna diyam. Their intelligence becomes filled with anxiety. Now Prahlad is teaching, he's a Vaikunthavasi. He's teaching the way of pure devotional service. In chapter 10 he says, because in this world people are absorbed from the core of their hearts in lusty desires. Lusty doesn't just mean male, female. It's wanting to be the enjoyer of the temporary. Bringing the senses to the object of the senses in the mood of being the enjoyer of those objects. Lusty desire in the heart of all living entities in this world. Because of that, you sent me to this realm to show the ways of devotional service. So he's from the spiritual world descending to this world to teach the ways of pure devotional service. He's a Vaikunthavasi. So that the opposite of Vaikuntha is Kunta, anxiety. And this word samudvigna is same, filled with anxieties. Now, normally anxieties are thought of as being in the mind. If the mind is in anxiety, the senses are also agitated, and behind the mind and senses there's the intelligence. And the intelligence is not oriented properly. So, to understand bhakti, we need to know how to orient our intelligence properly, because if we don't, it's going to be disturbed, or in anxiety, or turbulent, or affected by material consciousness. Consciousness is a wonderful subject. Consciousness is of the soul. A little over here sharing, but I remembered on a number of times hearing Srila Prabhupada say something I thought was really cool, but I didn't understand it. There were a number of things like that. So one of them was, the soul is both conscious and consciousness. Wow, sounds kind of mystical. What does that mean? But when he says this, what does he want us to understand by that? And I didn't get any answer. And then finally in Tattva Sandarbha I came across the answer. It's Jiva Goswami's refutation of Buddhism. He makes a reference to a verse from the Vedas that says, just like a deepa, a flame, a lamp, is luminous and it lights up other things in the room, like pots and plates. So similarly, the Atma is conscious and consciousness. So here's, picture your mind's eye, Diwali or Damodar, you're offering lamps to Damodar. So you light a lamp. And now here's a lamp. And the lamp is luminous and it illuminates things. There's luminosity and then it illuminates other things. The soul is conscious and consciousness expands from the conscious soul. And consciousness extends. One of the translations you'll find in Sankhya Yoga, the 24th element is Chaitana. And sometimes it's translated as contaminated consciousness. Now consciousness is spiritual. Consciousness and the soul are inseparable. So what's this contaminated consciousness thing? It's consciousness that extends through matter, and through our dear friend false ego, it misidentifies with matter. Self is intelligence, mind, and senses that are not who we are, but we think it's who we are, and it produces anxiety. The mind is having anxiety, the senses are disturbed, and so is the intelligence. Samudvigna dhyam. And it all starts with I and mine. Too simple, right? I and mine. It's just a nice package, and it keeps us bound up in material existence. In material existence, we're looking, we'll hear shortly, tomorrow, we're going to hear an essence of this idea, where a sat grahat idea is we're looking for happiness out there. We're looking for happiness outside of ourselves. And that's happiness. We just have to figure out how to configure it properly. Get enough stuff, put it in the right combination, the right way, and it's out there. We have faith that happiness is out there somewhere. It's inside. It's already there. But we're looking elsewhere, and so we never find that happiness. So we keep looking and looking and looking and looking. It's of the soul. But this contaminated consciousness keeps us looking elsewhere. And the intelligence, samudvigna dhyam, filled with anxieties. Then he uses this little metaphor that says, there's the word griham again, andha kupam. Andha kupam is a dark well, or sometimes blind well. Now, in this part of the country, do you have wells much? No. Use central water and everything. This phrase means a lot to me because one time I was spending some time in India. I was with a really nice devotee who had just finished completing this climbing a mountain of academia. He had just gotten his PhD from a prestigious university in India, and he was about to become a professor, and I came to know that he died. He was doing something in the evening hour, doing an errand in service to Krishna, and as he was walking along, it looked like grass, but it wasn't. It was a blind well. Grass had grown over the well. He fell in the well. The autopsy showed his neck broke, and he died and fell in the bottom of it because the well was empty. He just somehow fell in the blind well. Very dangerous. So Prahlad is using a similar metaphor. It's a person who is in this condition mentioned at the top, sada, always in this anxiety-filled intelligence, attached to material consciousness, material conception of being the enjoyer of the temporary. It's like falling in a dark well, where there's no water and only misery. That's line number 3. In line number 4, he says such a person should leave that situation and go to the forest. Prabhupada liberally just add, oh, by the way, Vrindavan, where Krishna consciousness is abundant, and Hari Ashrayeta. Hari, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, take shelter of him. So bhakti has these two things. Row your boat and lift the anchor. Make your effort and don't hold on to your attachments. Be willing, at least little by little, but be willing to let go of the attachments to being the enjoyer of the temporary, or finding happiness through fruitive activity. There's another statement that I heard Prabhupada say a few times, and it went in, so I'll repeat it. One of the primary responsibilities of a spiritual master is to thoroughly instruct his disciple in the abject futility of trying to find happiness through fruitive activity. Good, right? I'll say it again. One of the primary responsibilities of a spiritual master is to thoroughly instruct the disciple in the abject futility of trying to find happiness through fruitive activity. Prahlad does it. The Bhagavatam does it. Read Prabhupada's books carefully. over and over and over and over and over. All right, I get it. We still hold on. Into the realm of bhakti. We want to become the enjoyer of our piety and our activities, and if it doesn't happen, something's wrong with Krishna. Or something is wrong with me. Oh. It's the expectation for enjoyment outside of ourselves, in the temporary. We hold on to it stubbornly. It's hard to let go of it. But bhakti requires letting go of it. The Prahlad is teaching the way. He's teaching to his father. What's the best thing that you've learned? Pure devotional service, free from these attachments to the temporary. Now, Hari is, we'll hear it tomorrow more explicitly, but Hari is considered by Lord Nrsingadev, by Hiranyakashipu, to be enemy. Right? Because he knows that his younger brother, Hiranyaksha, was killed by Vishnu. And so he's taken a vow. I'm going to avenge the death of my brother. I will kill Vishnu. He's my enemy. He interfered with my family business, and I'm going to interfere with him. He's an enemy. So here's his son saying, take shelter of him. Boy, he didn't want to hear that. Here's Prabhupada's translation of the verse. Oh, best of the Asuras, king of the demons, as far as I have learned from my spiritual master, doesn't give his name, any person who has accepted a temporary body and temporary household life is certainly embarrassed by anxiety because of having fallen in a dark well where there is no water but only suffering. But there is an option. Such a person should give up this position and go to the forest. More clearly, one should go to Vrindavan, where only Krishna consciousness is prevalent, and should take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now, Srila Prabhupada wanted us, his followers, to at least visit the Holy Dham, have a nice place to stay when we go to the Holy Dham, and take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and his most merciful feature of Srimati Radharani. Now, anybody that's been before Radha Shyama-Sundara know, not only they're very beautiful, but they're very merciful. Her benediction giving hand is just like, receive her kindness, her mercy, her compassion. She wants. You just have to want what she wants. And it's very purifying, very beneficial. Anyone who has been to Vrindavan and offered their prayers and worshipped Radha Shyama-Sundara knows what I'm saying. Very special deities, very merciful deities. So that's what Prahlad was wishing for his father. And this is a foundational teaching, and tomorrow we'll hear some more as he explains the same ideas to a different audience, his two teachers. So any discussion? Yeah.
I was trying to understand
Trying to understand what?
what Prabhupada had said to you about consciousness, and you were giving the example of the flame
Yes.
and how it expands light.
Yes.
And I've got it in terms of how like the soul will emanate consciousness, but what is that? Like,
well, we are you're taking it. You're asking another question.
okay.
But I wanted to understand, what did Prabhupada mean by we are conscious and consciousness?
Mm-hmm.
So consciousness is, that's your question, what is it? It's awareness of something. The intelligence is discriminating one something from another something. But consciousness is awareness, cognizance. So, Sat and Chit and Ananda. That's what it is. Spiritual potency. We exist. We're now we have inherently the capacity of knowledge, of knowing, of the soul, of course, resting upon super soul, but we have that capacity, energy, potency, unlike matter. It's not conscious and inherently blissful. But in a simpler form, awareness, cognizance. That's what consciousness is. And it's spiritual. Then there's the contaminated consciousness. That's the covering of consciousness. But that's not what consciousness is. It's a 24th element. It's a material element. And it comes and it goes. But consciousness doesn't come and go. Okay? Yes. Here comes the microphone.
I was wondering about the same thing. If I could just
Expand.
explain to you how I processed it, and then if you could just, I don't know, tell me something about what I'm saying. I don't know. But I was trying to feel the difference between conscious and consciousness. Like at first, I was thinking conscious was like, I perceived that as being more in my head, like conscious of what, right? And like how to direct it. And then internally I was feeling consciousness because it was like more vague. But then when you explained it a little bit more, I was feeling, the way that you explained it was that the consciousness is what lights the room,
Yes.
right?
Yes. That's
So
right.
that's what I was, so then I had a flip in my understanding of that the
Yeah.
conscious
Yeah.
is internal, like maybe
Yes.
conscious of the self. And
Yes.
consciousness
Correct.
is what's, and because that's what Prabhupada says, right? Like
Yes.
consciousness is what pervades the body,
Yes.
and the soul is
And
the
it
Atma.
extends beyond the body. Our
Yeah.
consciousness goes across the room and, in outer space. We're conscious of things that are far away from us.
Yeah.
Consciousness extends.
Yeah, and that's what extends out and gives us the
Yes.
of what's
Yes.
around us.
So you're seeking clarification, and the answer is yes.
Yeah, so that switch in understanding of that is proper.
You got it.
Okay, thank you.
Now, language often depends upon how it's used. And in this circumstance, this language is appropriate, in that circumstance. So this is circumstance specific, or Prabhupada's use of language specific. So it doesn't mean someone else has got to be wrong unless it's this. It's language, linguistics. But energetically or dynamically. Science has a big, that is their consciousness. And there's, mechanistic science says no such thing. And they have their explanation. Your head's in the way. Okay, now your head's out of the way. So, Sankhya philosophy teaches, yes, there is consciousness, and it's not material. Mataji? It's not material. So you can't find it, measure it, weigh it. It's not material. You can experience its effect. It's spiritual. And then, so Sankhya teaches, then there's contaminated consciousness. That's not what consciousness is. Just like, a glove. The glove moves because when there's a hand inside, you wiggle the fingers and the glove moves. But you take the hand out of the glove and it doesn't wiggle. It's just a covering. The matter doesn't move unless it's animated by spirit. So contaminated consciousness dissipates into, the universe without the soul, the conscious entity, and then you can get contaminated consciousness if you want some. Or you can get the uncontaminated consciousness if you want some. Prahlad is teaching the uncontaminated, how to get there, what it is and how to get there. It's an important distinction. Now, making distinctions is a function of intelligence. That's what IQ tests are. It's discriminating or differentiating between a set of things and something that's not part of that set. Intelligence means being able to discern differences of things. Sankhya is discerning categories of matter over here, categories, plural, of spirit over there. We belong to the spirit category. That's intelligence. Now, intelligence has a purpose. Spiritual intelligence is, now let me absorb my consciousness in the Supreme and engage in loving service to the Supreme. That was quick. But it starts with having proper discrimination. Go back, and if you don't have proper discrimination, you don't have to be like a scientist or a scholar or something. You just have to, we belong to the category of spirit.
Yeah, so, I'm sorry.
That's consciousness. And we're conscious. That the enabler of consciousness. You don't have one without the other. But consciousness is resting upon the conscious self. They're inseparable. Sun and sunshine. The lamp and the luminosity of the lamp.
So, I was reading a bit in the Bhagavad Gita about just like today about the Sankhya. So it's like, I guess, systematically studying the material nature is the way that we can use our material intelligence to study like the glove. We can see that the consciousness is behind it.
Yes.
And then, so that's the way that I'm able to see how my consciousness is interacting with material nature.
Yes.
And then from that, then I can
Do it
start
for Krishna.
to be able to connect to the to the spiritual.
Yes. Yes, you got it.
Yeah.
Behind you, there's someone that had a question.
Oh, yes. So, Krishna consciousness isn't subject to material circumstances, am I correct?
Yes.
So, I guess that would be the worst case scenario, recognizing that no matter the situation, we can still be a devotee.
Yes.
So that opens it up for everyone.
Yes.
Now,
Equal opportunity organization.
yeah. So in that sense, what would be a purpose or reason for people to strive to work together to make a better material circumstance so more people can become Krishna conscious?
Well, there's different levels of all of that. But, there's the Acharya level, and there's the you and me level. The Acharya level is Prabhupada's creating iskcon. So that people can come together and hear and chant Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu. Create a circumstance where people can do that. Now, people can do that without an institution, but the institution is to facilitate, and is to facilitate loving exchanges. So, on the Acharya level, it's to create an opportunity for those who are forgetful of Krishna to become again mindful of Krishna by activities of hearing and chanting and loving relationships, taking prasadam, worshipping the deity. Prabhupada was visiting in Detroit. They had acquired a big wood frame home. It's like when we didn't have any, devotees didn't have anything, and they got a house, they got a something, they got a place, rented place. So Prabhupada came to visit. And he was remarking, this is in a residential neighborhood, didn't use those terms. So this is a house, but we don't call it a house, we call it a temple. So what's the difference between a house and a temple? It's a place where Krishna's service goes on. So therefore it's a temple. Many of the places that later, just like, many of the temples that we had during that time, they were former churches. But the churches became empty, and so they had to sell them. So we bought them. But now, Prabhupada said, the places are filled. And why? Because there's life. Because life attracts life. You don't have life, and it's not attractive. And so that life is hearing and chanting about Krishna. And attracts life. So the acharyas would like such things for those higher purposes. Otherwise, they're not interested. They're not interested. Followers, possessions, achievements. It's compassion. Create situations where people can come together and the whole structure of iskcon. That's a lot of,